A diplomatic crisis has erupted between Poland and Israel following the death of a Polish aid worker in Gaza, with the Polish president denouncing a comment by the Israeli ambassador as outrageous, and the foreign ministry in Warsaw saying it was summoning him for a meeting. A Polish man, 35-year-old Damian Sobel, was among 7 people who were killed while delivering food to besieged Palestinians in Gaza with the charity World Central Kitchen this week. Israel has called the incident a mistake that followed a misidentification, despite the vehicles being clearly marked and the organization having coordinated with the Israeli military prior to departure. Amid shock and outrage in Poland over the incident, Israel's ambassador to Poland, Yakov Livna, pushed back on Tuesday at what he said were attempts by the extreme right and left in Poland to accuse Israel of intentional murder in the attack. He said on social media Tuesday that anti-Semites will always remain anti-Semites, and Israel will remain a democratic Jewish state that fights for its right to exist, also for the good of the entire Western world. Polish President Andrzej Duda on Thursday called the comment outrageous and described the ambassador as the biggest problem for the state of Israel in relations with Poland. An activated but faulty missile launcher on a Danish Navy vessel has triggered a closure of airspace and shipping traffic in the Great Belt Strait. According to the Danish military, Denmark's armed forces said a technical problem arose with the Harpoon missile on board the Danish frigate HMS Niels Jewel as it was taking part in a test while anchored in the Korsør naval base on Thursday. Denmark's National Maritime Authority earlier warned ships not to sail through the Great Belt Strait, one of the world's busiest sea lanes and the main maritime access to the Baltic Sea, due to the risk of falling missile fragments. On its website, the Danish Maritime Authority said there was a military drill taking place in the Storebelt Strait between the Danish islands of Zealand and Funen. The danger area is estimated to be up to 7 kilometers, 4.3 miles, from Korsør at a height of approximately 1 kilometer, 0.62 miles, above sea level and not in the direction of the bridge and tunnel link across the Storebelt. The link operator said there was no risk to the road and train traffic on the bridge. Former United States President Donald Trump has warned that Israel is losing the PR war in Gaza because of the flood of distressing images coming out of the enclave. In an interview with conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt on Thursday, Trump criticized Israel for releasing the most heinous and most horrible videos of buildings being destroyed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. Asked if he was still with Israel 100%. Trump did not answer directly, but said Israel should get the war over with fast and get back to normalcy. Trump has described himself as the most pro-Israel president in U.S. history, pointing to his decision to relocate the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. But Trump has also harshly criticized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who provoked the Republicans' ire when he acknowledged U.S. President Joe Biden was rightfully elected in 2020. In an interview with Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom last month, Trump issued a similar warning about Israel losing international support as the conflict dragged on. Trump has also criticized U.S. President Joe Biden's policy on the Gaza war, going as far as claiming that Jews who vote for Democrats hate Israel, although he has not outlined in concrete terms how he would approach the conflict differently. On Thursday, the White House said Biden had warned Netanyahu in a phone call that continuing U.S. support for the war would depend on specific, concrete, and measurable steps to protect civilians. Biden's warning, his strongest yet, came after the Israeli military killed 7 aid workers for World Central Kitchen, including a U.S.-Canadian citizen. 1 year ago, Finland abandoned its long-standing tradition of neutrality and became NATO's 31st member. This entry into the transatlantic military alliance marked a turning point in Finland's approach to foreign and security policy. It effectively saw Helsinki walking away from its post-World War II approach to Moscow, through which the Nordic country had always sought to preserve decent ties with the Kremlin. Finland's decision to join was the result of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Moscow's actions towards Ukraine prompted policymakers in Helsinki and the majority of Finnish citizens to view NATO membership as the best way to deter Russia from ever invading their own country. NATO membership emerged as the only viable solution to fill this perceived deterrence deficit in Finnish security. Currently, the prevailing view on Russia and Finland across the society is overwhelmingly negative, and Finland calls for hardline solutions both in EU and NATO. Explained Pesu. Despite being an EU member since 1995 and having a history of close military cooperation with the US and other members of the Western Alliance, a major pillar of Helsinki's foreign policy was self-reliance, and the country's approach to global affairs had a largely national orientation. Spring has arrived in Afghanistan, and Afghan children have returned to their schools to begin a new academic year. Girls beyond the 6th grade across much of the country, however, are still unable to pursue an education and remain unsure what the future holds for them. 2 years ago, on a spring day like today, the hopes and dreams of Afghan schoolgirls were crushed by the Taliban's interim government. On March 21, 2022, the Taliban promised to reopen all schools in Afghanistan, seemingly ending the temporary ban it had placed on girls attending secondary schools since its return to power 7 months earlier. 2 days later, while many girls were enthusiastically preparing to return to school, the authorities reversed the decision and restricted girls over the age of 12 from attending state-run schools. In an apparent attempt to soften the blow, the Ministry of Education said the closure would be temporary and schools would be reopened once it put in place policies that would ensure compliance with principles of Islamic law and Afghan culture. 6 months later, with no plan in place to reopen secondary schools to girls in the foreseeable future, the government issued a new edict and banned girls and young women in Afghanistan from higher education. McDonald's has said it will buy its 30-year-old Israel franchise from Alonial, taking back ownership of 225 outlets that employ more than 5,000 people. The U.S. fast food chain has been subject to boycotts and protests since Alonial announced shortly after the October 7 attack by Palestinian group Hamas that it would be donating free meals to the Israeli military. McDonald's is a global company, but its franchises are often owned locally and operate autonomously. Its CEO Chris Kempczynski said previously the company had seen meaningful business impact in several markets in the Middle East and some outside the region due to the Israel-Hamas conflict. For more than 30 years, Alonial Limited has been proud to bring the Golden Arches to Israel and serve our communities. Omri Payton, CEO and owner of Alonial, said in a statement on Thursday. McDonald's added that it remains committed to the Israeli market and to ensuring a positive employee and customer experience in the market going forward. After the completion of the transaction in the coming months, McDonald's will own Alonial's outlets and operations while retaining its employees. The companies did not disclose the terms of the transaction. United States Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has warned that China is too large to try to export its way to rapid growth and would benefit by reducing excess industrial capacity that is pressuring other economies. Yellen said on Friday during a visit to China that she understands that Beijing's direct and indirect government support for manufacturing is linked to domestic development objectives. But she told an American Chamber of Commerce in China-hosted gathering in Guangzhou that state subsidies were leading to production capacity that significantly exceeds China's domestic demand, as well as what the global market can bear. Yellen's comments underscored her main objective in talks later on Friday with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng, to point out the problems that China's excess factory capacity and growing exports are causing abroad, increasing potential trade tensions. Premier Li Qiang in March set an ambitious growth target of 5% for 2024, fueled in part by more investment in new high-technology sectors as China struggles to overcome a property crisis and weak consumer demand. The International Monetary Fund currently forecasts China's 2024 real gross domestic product (GDP) growth at 4.6%, falling to 4.1% in 2025. Yellen said excess manufacturing capacity in China has been a problem in the past, but it has recently intensified with emerging risks in new sectors such as electric vehicles, EVs, batteries, and solar energy products, undercutting competing workers and businesses in the US, Mexico, and India. All eyes will be on Friday's U.S. unemployment numbers to see how many jobs were added in March and whether the unemployment rate continues to stay in its historically low range, or if it is time for the alarm bells to start ringing. Job growth in the United States has continued at a steady clip in the months since the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, when businesses came to a sudden stop. In the aftermath of the pandemic, as things started to pick back up, there was a real struggle to find people to work, and companies had to raise how much you paid to get people, said Matt Collier, an economist at Moody's Analytics. There are a number of factors behind that, including restrictions on the number of foreigners entering the country during the COVID-19 pandemic and baby boomers dropping out of the workforce for fear of the pandemic, creating nearly a shortage of some 2 million. Workers aged 55 and older. As business ground to a halt as a result of the pandemic. Nearly 22 million jobs were lost. A lot of the hiring since then has been about refilling those roles, said Dan North, senior economist at Allianz Trade, adding, "It's not like those jobs went away." Since the start of the pandemic, the U.S. economy has lost 21,888,000 jobs and has added 27,387,000, according to government data. You could argue that the economy has created only 5,499,000 new jobs, said North, but jobs are being created nonetheless. While employment fell by 243,000 jobs in December 2020, following 7 consecutive months of increases, the labor market has consistently added jobs each month since then, taking the U.S. economy on a 38-month streak of monthly job gains. Late last year, Balinese woman Nih Luputu Rustini got the shock of her life when she tried to withdraw cash from an ATM to complete a renovation project at her ancestral home. Working as a cleaner during the day and a nanny by night, Rustini had saved 37 million Indonesian rupiahs, $2,340, in an account at Bank Rakyat Indonesia, Indonesia's largest bank. But the ATM showed a balance of almost zero. When she visited her local BRI branch, a teller informed her that her money was gone. "They said a hacker had stolen my money and they could not return it to me," Rustini told Al Jazeera. "It's not fair because it took me a long time to earn that money, but the hackers took it in seconds. I was shocked." I made Ride Dwi Ada Diatmika, a leather goods manufacturer in Bali, had a similar experience last August when he tried to make his first withdrawal in years. A hacker had cleared out his savings of 72 million rupiahs, $4,650, the previous May. Liverpool survive a scare to beat Sheffield United at Anfield and move back to the top of the Premier League. Darwin Núñez gave Liverpool a 1-0 lead in the 17th minute before the Blades equalised through an own goal by Connor Bradley in the 58th minute. But the Reds regained the lead through a spectacular Alexis Mac Allister strike in the 76th minute, and Cody Gakpo then sealed the victory with a late header. Liverpool are top with 70 points, Arsenal are second on 68, while defending champions Manchester City sit third on 67. With all 3 title contenders having played 30 games. Bottom-placed Sheffield United remain 10 points from safety, albeit with a game in hand on 17th-placed Nottingham Forest. Chelsea beat Manchester United 4-3 at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League. Cole Palmer scored a hat-trick, including 2 in stoppage time, to seal the win. Conor Gallagher and Cole Palmer gave the Blues the lead, but Alejandro Garnacho and Bruno Fernandes pull United level. The Blues climb out of the bottom half of the table to take 9th with the win. The Red Devils' hopes of catching 4th-placed Aston Villa are dented, and the gap remains 11 points. Liverpool beat Sheffield United 3-1 in the night's other match to move back to the top of the table. The season-ending Women's Tennis Association (WTA) finals will be held in Saudi Arabia's capital Riyadh from 2024 to 2026, the tennis body said, ending months of speculation and marking the Gulf country's latest foray into the sport. To have a women's tournament of this magnitude and profile is a defining moment for tennis in Saudi Arabia. The WTA Finals has the power to inspire far beyond the sport, especially for our young girls and women. Saudi Minister of Sport Prince Abdulaziz bin Turki Al Faisal Al Saud said on Thursday. Speculation that the event could be shifted to Saudi Arabia had intensified after the men's ATP Tour said last August that its next-gen finals would be held in Jeddah from 2023 to 2027. The WTA selected Riyadh following a comprehensive evaluation process over several months, which has included assessment of multiple bids from different regions and engagement with players. It said in a statement, Saudi Arabia has invested heavily in sports like football, golf and Formula One auto racing in the last few years, while critics accuse the kingdom of using its public investment fund to sportswash its human rights record. The country denies accusations of human rights abuses and says it protects its national security through its laws. The new 3-year deal will increase the prize money for this November's season-ending championship to a record $15.25 million, a 70% increase from 2023.